Good night. It is 6 minutes past 9 p.m. I'm going to be sharing with you the final 2 chapters of this book. This will be part 4. 1, 2 and 3 should be out there somewhere. So I'll just say just 2 prayers. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom his love commits me here, ever this night be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. Amen. Holy Michael, Archangel, defend me in this day of battle. Be my safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, I humbly pray. And do thou, Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust down to hell Satan and all the wicked evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen. So I've already read what it's about in the other sections. So I'm now going to share with you. Part 4 is chapter 9, beginning at page 53. Return to Spain and then to Paris in March 1524 to 28. Chapter 10 is from page 57. 3 lessons from Ignatius. Lesson 1, change is okay. Lesson 2 and lesson 3. So, just going to put that there. I can bring this in front of me so I don't have to make sure that you can hear me because it's in front of me now. Chapter 9, return to Spain and then to Paris, March 1524 to 28. With his plan to stay in Jerusalem now dashed, Ignatius found himself back where he started his journey, Spain. The rejection of the Franciscans meant Ignatius had to reconsider what he would do with his life. In his prayer, Ignatius still felt drawn to help souls, but he would have to find a new avenue to make this ambition a reality. Arriving back in Spain, Ignatius set himself up in Barcelona, where he resumed his usual practice of begging for alms and lodging in hospitals with the poor and unwanted. During this period, Ignatius reconnected with some wealthy women he had met while he was in Manresa. Among them was Inés Pascual. In Barcelona, Ignatius found support and encouragement from these women, and in return he provided them with spiritual advice. The oldest remaining letter from Ignatius was to Inés Pascual, and in it he offered spiritual guidance. This practice of spiritually directing women became a source of suspicion amongst church authorities. Many questioned what authority Ignatius had to offer spiritual advice. After all, he had no formal education, and such a role was the preserve of the clergy. The lack of education was something he wanted to correct, and he decided to return to school. At this point, Ignatius was in his mid-30s and found himself amongst teenage boys, trying to get a better command of Latin, which he would need for future studies. Here was a moment of humility. The once proud courtier was back in school amongst children, and found that this was a struggle academically. He recounts this in his autobiography. Whenever he tried to memorize anything, as it is necessary in the early stages of Grammarly study, new understanding of spiritual delights came to him, and in such a way that he could neither memorize anything nor could he get rid of them, no matter how much he tried. Here Ignatius was becoming distracted by seemingly good things, which made his study laborious and difficult. His primary desire at this time was to study, not to grow in spiritual insights. Thus Ignatius noted the movement that was taking place within him. While objectively good, Ignatius exposed these understandings of spiritual delights to be the evil spirit's tactic. As Ignatius learnt in Manresa, the evil spirit will always try to use a seemingly good thing to keep a person from achieving a greater good. Had Ignatius decided to lose interest in his studies and allow his mind to roam to other distractions, it is likely he would have remained uneducated and thus been unable for the purpose God was calling him to. This period of Ignatius's life coincided with a group known as Alumbrados, enlightened ones. These were a group of Christians who were attracted to mysticism and desired a personal connection to God. They believed that when this personal connection happened, all other things became superfluous. They shunned all forms of external worship and believed that sin was irrelevant once they reached the point of mystical connection. How misguided can they be? The group became a target of suspicion and attracted the attention of the Spanish Inquisition. Ignatius's reputation as a mystic and lack of theological education led some believing him to be an alumbrado, which he never was. At this time, his simplicity of life had begun to attract followers who joined in his way of life and catechetical work. Unlike later in his life, these groupings were never formalized and did not persevere. When he finished 2 years of studies in Barcelona, he travelled to Alcalá. There he began university studies. In his spare time, he taught children their catechism and had spiritual conversations with adults. His spiritual conversations were based on what would eventually become his spiritual exercises. Presenting his own interpretation on spiritual matters aroused his detractors' suspicion, and word of this travelled to ecclesiastical authorities. The accusations led to Ignatius being suspected as an alumbrado, which got him into trouble with the Spanish Inquisition. He touches on this period in his autobiography. This matter reached the Inquisition in Toledo, and when the inquisitors came to Alcalá, the pilgrim was warned by their host, who told him that they were calling them sack wearers and enlightened one. They immediately began an investigation into their lives, but in the end they returned to Toledo without summoning them. The investigation by the Inquisition was not the end of his trouble. Ignatius and his followers were criticized for their dress and continued teaching. This resulted in his imprisonment for a period of time. A more serious event occurred in Salamanca when he ran foul of the Dominican friars. His writings, which became the spiritual exercises, came under scrutiny, and Ignatius was put on trial. The occasion caused division in the Dominican community and saw support from people in the city who had come to respect Ignatius. Ignatius's opponents wanted to know whether or not his thinking and writing were in line with church teaching. Writing about the trial, Ignatius tells us, Then they ordered him to explain the first commandment as he usually explained it. Their problem was, he, though uneducated, was determining the question. Here was the central point his opponents raised. Ignatius had no right to teach, as they saw him as unlearned within the conventions of the day. Once again, he had to decide to make a change in his life. Knowing that the best education in Europe was at that time in Paris, Ignatius decided to set out there once he was found not guilty at his trial. His close encounters with various church authorities meant that he would have to get the necessary qualifications to help souls and ultimately become a priest. In 1528, Ignatius left Spain for France, closing the door on his time as a wandering pilgrim. Paris would begin his journey towards founding the Society of Jesus, Jesuits. I've got loads of books right behind me, about 9 of them from Jesuits. But that is another story. So that's the end of chapter 10, and there's no points in this ending. So now we will continue with chapter 10. 3 lessons from Ignatius. Lesson 1, change is okay. Ignatius had his life mapped out for him. He was going to be a soldier. He would win many battles, achieve great glory, and marry the woman of his dreams. God had other plans, though, and the impact of a cannonball not only shattered his leg, but left his plans in tatters too. In a world where you are expected to have everything in order and certainty is so important, little room is left for life-changing events. While all change is not necessarily good, you have to make room for change and to explore where it can lead you. Ignatius did not embrace the change productively at first. His early endeavours were often met with failure and disappointment. His journey to the Holy Land did not turn out the way he wanted. When Ignatius' existing plans did not work out, he opened himself to exploring change. Over time, he came to see that the change that emerged turned out to be beneficial and brought him greater satisfaction than the life that had previously seemed so certain. Lesson 2. Community is vital. After his religious conversion, Ignatius came to realize that the insights God was giving him had to be shared, and he sought out like-minded people. Much of his early ministry was focused on the sharing of his spiritual exercises with various women, like Inez Pascual, who would form the financial and prayerful backbone of the Society of Jesus, Jesuits. Ignatius' voluminous correspondence contain many letters to these women, showing how their friendship and prayers motivated him into greater service of God. Ignatius understood the importance of getting help along the way. His ability to listen and his openness to others helped him form relationships with people. Like the wealthy Spaniard and the Doge of Venice, who could help on his pilgrim journey, he learned to listen to others, even when they were telling him what he did not want to hear. Unlike at the Battle of Pamplona in the Holy Land, Ignatius listened to those around him, especially the Franciscan provincial. His apostolic zeal was strong, and he knew he had a good product with the spiritual exercises. But he also saw that he needed help in bringing them to the broadest possible audience. This realization motivated him to join with his roommates at the University of Paris, Peter Faber, and this very famous name, Francis Xavier, lovely saint, to found the Jesuits, and he's well loved in Jamaica too. They encouraged others to join them in helping bring about a greater awareness of God's love. Ignatius learned he could not go it alone, and that relationships with others are meaningful. Lesson 3. Make time for contemplation. While recuperating from his wounds, Ignatius spent a good deal of time in bed. He had a lot of free time and was looking for entertainment. Initially, he wanted to read popular works of fiction to satisfy his active imagination. He was disappointed to find out that the books he wanted were not available, and he had to make do with holy books instead. Reading these books left him time to think about Jesus and the lives of the saints. At first, he preferred to imagine more worldly things, but progressively he found greater pleasure in daydreaming about Jesus and the lives of the saints. By making space for something new, Ignatius began to contemplate things beyond his standard frame of reference. He began to consider the possibility that God loved him and wanted to be in a relationship with him. By opening his mind to this, Ignatius was able to make sense of things and see that he was called to a greater form of service than anything he had previously envisioned. The more Ignatius moved into contemplation, the less relevant his previous enjoyments came to be. In their place, he discovered real fulfillment and contentment. I've got these other books, Pedro Arrupe, Blessed John Sullivan. I don't have those other two though. So that is the end of the book, A Convert's Story. I'll read what's on the back for those that haven't heard it, and I'll tell you about the writer. He's written other books. I've got one here. Can't remember the name of it. Patrick Corkery S.J. is a member of the Society of Jesus. Originally from County Cork, he has spent time since 2015 in the United Kingdom and the United States studying to become a Jesuit priest. And he wrote this little booklet. And to many, he's talking of St. Ignatius. He is the soldier saint, the disciplined founder of the Society of Jesus. Yet Ignatius of Loyola was also a man of great warmth. After his death, he was remembered not so much as a swashbuckler, but as a small man with a constant smile. On the 500th anniversary of his conversion, Patrick Corkery S.J. brings this warm side of Ignatius to life. St. Ignatius of Loyola, A Convert's Story, takes you step by step through the early life of Ignatius from 1521 to 1528, and it includes guided reflections on the major events of Ignatius's early life, as well as Ignatian lessons for today. Tracing his journey from the Battle of Pamplona through the convalescence in Loyola and on to his spiritual year in Manresa, Corkery emphasizes Ignatius's flaws, his failings, and his spiritual transformation. In Ignatius, Corkery finds 500 years on, a truly modern figure, a man who became a spiritual navigator of ego and of ambition, of joy and of despair, and who learned to listen in a time bursting with new ideas, new technologies, and new words. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you and heal you. I'm sending you his peace in abundance, and may you always be happy and joyful in the Lord. And I have got a lot more books, but I have to finish this book, which I plan to do. I've begun it. It's not a Catholic book, but it's a very good book, and I bought it in a Dominican church, so they must like it. So I'll be finishing that as well, but I'll be starting other books. I've got so many here. I haven't selected which one yet. So good night and God bless, and I hope to do enough recordings this week to take a bit of time off next week to be with my friends, because I'm not often with them. I love them all. Oh, we communicate, but not in the way of, relaxing and just being together and sharing thoughts and things. All right, God bless. Good night.